Good evening and welcome to For the Record. October 10th marks World Mental Health Day, and it just so happens to coincide with Fiji Day. The theme this year is mental health in the workplace. According to the WHO, statistics a staggering 10,000 plus Fijians live with depression. With me this evening, Selina Kuruleather of Kuruleather Associates, a renowned psychotherapist, and a mental health leader and advocate and survivor, Gary Rounds. Welcome to the show.
Minako, thanks for having us.
Thank you for being here. How has mental health come a long way in Fiji?
Thank you. And yes, World Mental Health Day, extremely important. And when I first started in this business in Fiji back in 2003, we didn't even celebrate the day. So in terms of recognition, it's come a long way. In terms of people talking about mental health, I think it's great. Have we reached where we want to be going? Absolutely not. I think a lot more can and needs to be done. But the fact that we're talking about mental health, that we're talking about depression is really good. And I say this because a lot of times we don't talk about mental health. We look at people and see whether they have a bandage on or they're in a sling or the big plaster on their forehead, and then we think there's something wrong, or someone holding a cane because they're disabled. But mental health, we don't always see the signs until we spend some time with that person. By talking to them, by sharing their stories, sharing their lives, then we know. So I'm really glad that we have recognized and celebrate World Mental Health Day in Fiji. Coincidentally, it's a great coincidence that it's Fiji's Independence Day, but perhaps more can be done. So not only are we celebrating Independence Day, but Mental Health Day, because without mental health, there is no wellness.
Was there any celebration this year?
Not that I'm aware of. I do know that there was, earlier on in the week, that there was a little function at the St. Giles Psychiatric Hospital, and in some in the districts there were some little get-togethers, but in terms of a huge audience with marches or play cards like they had for Fiji Independence Day, no, there was no such thing. I did not see it.
But why mental health though? Why does it need to have its own day? I mean, clearly things like stroke, heart attack, diabetes, these are very serious issues. Why mental health?
Because mental health, unless you're mentally healthy, then your ability to perform or to effectively function and be a contributing citizen, or a contributing responsible citizen, giving back to communities would be very difficult. It would be challenged. You are right. Diabetes, stroke are all very high, and they're all very important. But like most of the other NCDs, people see these things. But mental health, we could be having a conversation right here, right now, but you don't know what's going on in here, unless you keep talking to me, and then maybe Sally's showing some symptoms, or maybe the way she's talking about going away for a long time, then you can gauge, perhaps she's feeling a bit suicidal. But unless you talk about it, you will never know. And like WHO has pointed out the statistics in Fiji, but the statistics world over, it's a staggering burden. And the global burden of disease, of mental health, is amazing. But people are not investing, governments, political leaders are not investing enough into mental health for people to get healthy, not only to be able to function as effective members of a community for their families, but also in the workplace. So if I'm depressed and I'm going to work, what is my productivity? Yeah?
That figure itself, 10,000 plus, staggering. So that's just on depression. And how does that, I'm assuming that affects the economy. That
absolutely. I apologize, I don't have any statistics with me right now. But there have been a few studies. The Lancet study has come out. The studies coming out of Australia, New Zealand, America, not only talking about indigenous populations, but whole populations, and specifically at depression, at alcohol use. And it's the burden of someone being mentally ill, mentally challenged, the burden not only for themselves, but their burden that they present to their families, to the community, because they cannot function, is amazing. It's blindingly, it's phenomenal. And unless we do something so that we decrease this global burden of disease, of mental health, mental illness, people will continue to underperform, people will not get the help that they need, jobs will be left half done because people are not getting the support they need to be able to perform to the maximum ability.
Why do you think mental health is not a priority in this country especially?
Do you want to have a go at that? Why is it not a priority in Fiji? I think it's not a priority for many reasons. One is there's still a lot of discrimination. For people to talk about the hospital, for example, St. Giles Hospital, and people going, oh, you can Lilia. So there's still that whole stigma and discrimination around it, number one. Number two is people don't understand mental illness. People don't understand that someone can still be fully functioning but also suffer depression. People don't understand that when I'm depressed, I can take medication, I can see a therapist, and I can get better. People don't seem to really understand that in this country, like in many other countries. A third reason I believe why mental health is not a priority for a lot of people is because you can't see it. You can't see it.
Do you think that's part of the main reason why it's not a priority? If they can't see it, then
it probably doesn't exist.
Not a priority.
It's not that important.
Or it's not a worthy cause.
It's going to go away, exactly. It's going to go away. And I just want to challenge people out there who think that it's not a priority, that you need to make it a priority, because unless you're fully functioning.
We'll be back. You're watching For the Record. Good evening and welcome back to For the Record. So, as I was saying, Gary, what was some of your experiences that you faced, especially when dealing with mental illness?
All right. Well, first, let me just start off with introducing myself. My name is Gary Rounds. I'm 33 years old. In 2006, I was diagnosed with depression and as a paranoid schizoid. I was given medication for depression, anxiety, as well as psychosis, I would say. Yeah. And I was admitted in St. Giles twice while I was at the bank, and it took me 4 whole months to recover, because apart from dealing with my mental illness, I had to also deal with the stigma that I would face once I get discharged. So in April of 2006, I was discharged and I went back into work. I was really scared. I was thinking about how people would judge me. But as the years went on, I tried to handle myself as best I could, but then I relapsed, got back into St. Giles. Then one day, after I got discharged, I decided that I didn't want to go back to work. I had to look after my health and think about my future. So I stayed home. I told myself, I'm not going to take this medication. I need to try and be a constructive member of society again.
Does your family have a history of mental illness?
Some of my family suffer from depression, but just that.
And in this particular case, if there's a history of mental illness in the family, is there a higher chance of a family member getting a mental illness as well?
The research does show that. And again, it's not for all mental illnesses, so I'm afraid to make a very general statement here. But there have been links where depression particularly can be genetic. There are links. There are studies that point to that. But we will need to be very careful when we talk about the whole mental illness spectrum, because it's huge and it's quite different. And then, of course, if someone is already predisposed, even like alcohol use, if someone is predisposed to alcohol use, because your parents were drinking, your grandparents, and then you now are starting to drink, or your use of alcohol now will also be dependent on the type of environment you are living in and the stressors that you face every day. So there are links for certain mental illnesses that it can be in the family, but we need to be careful that we don't say that because A is sick, it's because so and so was sick. That a straight cause and effect is very difficult to establish. Yeah.
What has been one strength that you can say that you've identified about yourself through your experience?
Yeah. I realized that I was very resilient. I persevered through a lot, and I endured a lot of struggles. Yeah? One of which was trying to get a job. It's been 10 years since I've had a decent job. For the past 2 months, I was working at a hot dog shack. I was very thankful to my boss who allowed me to manage his hot dog shack. And then for the past 10 days, I've been working at Bondwell as a sales rep. And just recently, I've been offered a job in one of the banks here in Fiji.
Nice. What have you noticed that has helped you with your recovery process?
They say it takes a village to raise a child. In my case, it takes a village to support a person with a mental illness. Yeah? And I'm very thankful that I had a very supportive family. I had friends who were there for me and who were very inclusive and accepted me despite the fact that I had a mental illness and that I had been a patient of St. Giles. I met a lot of people who I worked with, and yeah, it's been an awesome experience.
Would you say those are one of the key things to recovery? Having
Yes.
a good support system like family?
Absolutely, absolutely, and especially when there are life-changing experiences, and then you have people you can turn to speak about your problems and other issues, and also your feelings and emotions.
How have you used your experience to help others who are going through something similar?
In 2008, 2008, I formed a group called the Youth Champs I co-founded a group called the Youth Champs for Mental Health. Basically, we promote awareness on mental health and the stigma associated with it, and also the prevention of suicide. We basically go out into the communities and we talk with people about mental health, mental illness, and seeing the signs and symptoms of suicide. Just recently, I've been going out into schools, talking to students, primarily on their career choices, but at the same time linking mental health to it.
And I believe in 2008, that's when you became, when you entered the
In
contestant.
2009.
2009.
In 2009.
Yeah.
What was it like? I mean, being vulnerable on stage and letting the entire of Fiji, everyone in Fiji know about, your mental illness, what you went through. I mean, that couldn't have been easy, especially when you just recovered, or when you just like started still recovering, getting your life together.
Yeah. One of the main reasons why I entered the Hibiscus Festival was to promote and create more awareness on mental health and mental illness, because Hibiscus is such a big thing in Fiji, right? And it was a huge platform, and it was the best platform to speak on about mental health. Yes, it was stressful. I was very vulnerable, but I had a good group of people behind me who helped me through my journey during the Hibiscus, and also the other contestants as well. They were very accepting, and they made the journey fun.
Thank you very much for that, Gary. We'll be back right after the break. You're watching For the Record. Good evening and welcome back to For the Record. So, Gary, as we were saying, talking about your life, your experiences, one thing that I've wanted to know is, getting your life back on track, what has that been like? Like, tell me about some of the challenges that you faced.
One of the main things was being accepted back into society. There's this one time where I had to walk. Just basically walk and keep my head up and fight the paranoia and fight the thought that people, when they saw me, You know, they say, oh, this person went to St. Giles. That was one of the main things that I had to do. So I walked probably 3 hours a day just to fight that stigma, and got to a stage where I got used to it. And then I started hanging out with friends, going out into functions like poetry slams, reciting poetry, and going out into the schools, talking about my
So
experience.
you walking 3 hours a day, clearly physical activities help with your recovery process, and not
Yes.
just your train of thought.
Yes. Yeah. And while walking, I constantly talk to myself in my mind, thinking about what I should be doing, giving positive affirmations all the time. Don't worry, Gary. You're gonna go through this. There's light at the end of the tunnel. You know, out of every crisis, there's an opportunity. Stuff like that. You reap what you sow. So I've had to make a lot of choices. I cut down on my alcohol. I stopped smoking marijuana, that sort of stuff. And another challenge that I faced just recently was, because for the past 10 years I didn't work. I stayed home. And as recent as mid-August, I started looking for work. I applied, sent out countless applications, went to many interviews, and I disclosed my history, my mental health history. And
what was
some of the interviewers were taken aback by my story, but after the interviews, I'd say that it went really well. And if they don't call back, I take it as a positive, saying that it's basically because of the weaknesses on my CV and my experience, not based on my mental health. And I've been very fortunate to actually gain employment. Nathan Fong, he's the owner of Nathan's Hot Dog Shack on Rosala Bay Road, just next to USP. He kindly offered me to work in his hot dog shack and manage it. I left as recent as 2 weeks ago, and I joined Bondwell. I also disclosed my mental health history, and because of my pride in providing excellent customer service, they saw that I had potential, and they hired me. And like I said, today is my last day
At Bondwell.
at Bondwell, and tomorrow I start my new work at the bank.
Wow, amazing.
Truly amazing. What sort of policies and regulations are in place to help people living with mental illness?
First, Fiji is a signatory to the Convention on Disability, and mental illness comes under
A
disability, the Convention on the Rights of the Disabled. So you're covered there, but I guess it's the implementation, it's the monitoring, you know. If someone, Gary shared a wonderful story here, you know, how he is, you know, you put yourself out there and people interview you, you expose yourself a little. If they call you back and you get a job, great. If they don't, any potential employee, you're looking for a job, you need to ask them, okay, how could I improve? Where were my weaknesses? So that you prepare yourself for another job interview, another possibility. If the employer tells you, we can't employ you because you were a patient, then you just go straight to the Ministry of Labour. There's your outlet right there, because that is discrimination and that's against the law. So in this case, it's never happened, or I'm not familiar with any cases where someone wasn't given a job because of their mental health history. But it's important that people who are survivors, family members, that you know that there is avenues for redress if you feel that you've been treated unfairly. You can also go to the Fiji Disabled People's Association and get help there. You can go to any number of, you can go to the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Women, and they should be able to assist you as well. But there are policies, there is legislation. We have the Family Health Act, Family Health Decree 2010, that everyone should be given a fair go, obviously based on experience and your competency and skills. But if you feel that you've been
There's also a mental health decree.
Yeah, there is a Mental Health Decree 2010, and that Mental Health Decree covers everything from the user of the service to the service provider to the infrastructure in where service providers use, and also to the hospital facilities. So all of this is in the mental health decree. It's just the policing of it. It's the implementation, and to make sure that the parts of the decree that we should be following, we are following. But it's sad to say that, well, we have an act. I think we should stop there. But now that's a good start, but now we need to work it and improve the services. For example, at St. Giles Hospital, that institution has been around, for the best part of 1850s, 1860s, and it's still here. How much have we refurbished and renovated? And I'm not talking about cosmetic renovation. I'm talking about building, new facilities. Our friends in Samoa just got a brand new psychiatric hospital. Yes, it was funded by, I believe, the Chinese, but it's a wonderful hospital. It gives recognition that we need to, someone who is mentally ill and their family need to come to a place where they will see recovery. That it's not just a dumping ground. Just go and stay there and sit. It's not supposed to be like that. Gary pointed out something really important here, that because of his family and friends and the ability.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think there hasn't been any change or any persistence to?
Because people haven't really seen mental illness. Because people don't see mental illness. People see you and me, but they don't know what's going on up here, what's going on in here. This is what people need to see, that we are treating another human being. Apart from physical disability, which is very visible, the mental disability or mental illness, or if I'm depressed, I'm disabled when I'm depressed. I can't function. If I'm depressed, I can't look after my children. Yeah? But people don't see that. When they see a mother sitting down, can't feed the child, the mother is sleeping, or kangori the buka. We still use these terms. But you know what? Woman who's just had a child, this is postpartum depression. It's well documented. But we don't look at it this way.
That's a very...
We're still thinking of it from a more cultural... Yeah? Do you think? It's from more cultural superstitious...
I'm sorry, but I have to stop you there.
Yeah.
I will continue that right after this. You're watching For the Record. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back. Good evening and welcome back to For the Record. So, Selena, you were talking about refurbishments in the hospitals. Why? One thing I can't understand is it's been so long. Why hasn't St. Giles Hospital, Psychiatric Hospital, had a facelift, had an upgrade? Why are the bars still in place?
Yeah. I think we should call the minister in here and the PS and everybody else, but obviously we can't. But I think from my side, from the work that I do, from what I've seen of the facility, and the general stigma and discussion about mental health in this country is that there is still an association. When we talk about mental health, we talk about discrimination. We're talking about it in terms of superstitious belief, spirituality, religious beliefs, and a curse and all that. And in some quarters, people are failing to understand that mental health or the lack of mental health or mental illness, the presence of mental illness, means that you need to get medication, you need to get treatment, you need to do talk therapy, you need to do psychotherapy, you need to, do all sorts of things, physical activity, you need to have a community that can support you. But people don't see it that way. They just think, oh, there's something wrong here, okay, let's put this person away. This is the reason I think people have not given as much as could be done to help the St. Giles Psychiatric Hospital. I was talking about Samoa, but it took a cyclone and so many disasters. So when the money came in, they said, right, we'll go with a brand new psychiatric hospital. The beds were too little, too few, so they had to build a bigger bed because there were more users or consumers of mental health services. Here in Fiji, the hospital is big, but it's old. How can someone recover when the facilities, the walls they're looking at is just blank, it's white, it's dreary, It's boring. How does that help my creativity and imagination when I'm trying? If I'm depressed, I'm already in that black hole. I'm trying to get out of that black hole.
Which begs the question, is there enough people trained around mental health to look after people living with mental illness in the psychiatric hospitals?
In Fiji, compared to other Pacific Island countries, we have quite a few psychiatric nurses and psychiatrists here. They also have just reintroduced the postgraduate diploma in nursing psychiatry. So there are people being trained. Is there enough speciality or experts in this area? Absolutely not.
But is there a want to be part of or to work in the area of mental health?
Absolutely. We here in Fiji, we just hosted the Creating Futures Mental Health and Leadership in the Pacific towards the end of September. It was attended by most of the Pacific Island countries, and it was facilitated by great facilitators from Australia, New Zealand, India, South Africa. And we had a huge population, a huge part of participants were Fijians.
And how many of them were nurses and doctors?
Quite a large number, but they were general practicing nurses and doctors who want to go into the area of mental health, who were interested. So for us, for people like us who are working in mental health, this is great because you already have one skill set. Attending such conferences, maybe signing up for the postgraduate diploma in nursing, psychiatric nursing, you add another skill set. Having said that, in many third world countries or developing countries, including Fiji, there is a definite lack of mental health specialists. Australia and New Zealand, there is also a lack, like in America, because the spectrum of the needs of a person, mental health needs are quite different. Can be something from a simple stressor of how do I pay my mortgage and how do I get my children through school, to something that's very life-threatening and I'm feeling suicidal.
It's,
so the
it's
spectrum.
one thing to be trained though, but are they passing on that knowledge?
You mean like training of trainers?
Yeah, are they training the younger nurses, getting them more equipped with the skills to handle people living with mental illness? Well, not to handle, but assist.
Yeah, I think they are doing it, but definitely more could be done. I know we're advocating for more community-based mental health workers. So all these, because there are community outreach programs that go out as part of the public health system. So if you could have someone with mental health or psychiatric nursing skills go in that team, that would greatly assist the team and also the people in the community. Now, just on that note, Matthew, I think one of the issues that we have failed miserably in is supporting not only the person, the survivor or the consumer of the mental health service, but supporting the family. If a person is manic, it is important that the family members are also given information, correct information on the importance of medication compliance, on the importance of eating at the right time, of adequate rest, of activity, of routine. But I don't think we're doing enough in terms of supporting families so that the family is better placed to support someone who is suffering from a mental illness.
And what would be the most common types of mental illness in the country?
Oh, I don't have stats right now, but from the last stats that we had a look at, depression is right there among them. Schizophrenia with psychosis is right there high among them. Suicide is, I shouldn't say is is not a mental illness, but is a symptom. Is also very high in this country. Looking at the stats of suicide, a lot more work needs to be done.
Just touching on suicide, I recently read that it is the #1 cause of death for young people. This is more than drowning and car accidents.
Absolutely.
That's quite alarming.
That is alarming because this is an unnecessary death. People, a lot of young people, they are supposed to be now at their prime, looking for jobs, going to university, finding a partner, finding a career, figuring out what they're going to do. But because they're so stressed out, maybe there is some history of mental illness there, maybe they just feel unsupported, maybe the pain, emotional pain is too much, and all this adds up. makes, and the person makes that decision that this is the way to go, when it is not an option. Suicide is never an option, no matter which way you try and cut it. It is not an option. So it's important that we recognize the signs and symptoms of suicide, that we recognize when a family member or a friend is in need, and we talk to them. If we can't help them, we're not best placed to help them.
That's a very interesting point, and we'll touch back on that. But for now, we'll take a quick break, and you're watching For the Record. Good evening and welcome back to For the Record. Now, we had spoken about suicide and you were talking about the signs. Gary, what I wanted to ask you is, what would be some of the signs from your own personal experience?
All right. From my own personal experience, I became very depressed. There was this point in time where I started giving things away, very valuable things that I held dear to me. I started saying goodbye to some close friends. I was telling them that I would see them later on. I stopped eating. I stopped socializing with people. I kept to myself. I stayed in my own home. And it got to a stage where I tried to overdose myself with the prescription that was given to me for me to cope with my depression. Then one day I went back to the psychologist. And we were talking, and then when we were done, just as I was leaving, I told him, I tried to commit suicide. I don't trust myself with my own life. And then he made the suggestion that I should seek professional help and be institutionalized, which basically means that I had to be admitted in St. Giles and be kept on close watch.
So, the interesting point, one of the interesting points that I got from there was that there was a complete change in behavior.
Yes.
Now, this is very interesting because this is something that I believe parents could find very valuable. Very valuable piece of information, noticing signs, the kids not eating, not being themselves.
Yes.
What are some of the ways you believe or you think that could help parents approach the situation better?
Okay. I'll tell you a story. A recent relative of mine had contacted me on Facebook and had asked, what can I do to help a friend who is suffering from depression? And I told him that the best thing you can do is learn about it and learn about how you can manage or assist your friend with his or her depression. And at the same time, be in close contact with the other people that are in that person's support network.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. Help where you can. Also know who are the other people that need to be involved in the recovery of the person who's feeling suicidal or has indicated self-harm. Extremely important. Also extremely important is if the risk is very high, that you do not leave the person alone. Physical presence is the number one deterrence of someone who's contemplating self-harm or suicide. There are many signs, and Gary has talked about it, but I just want to go back to what Gary shared, that he spoke to a psychologist and was told, you need to get help. And this is extremely important.
Yes.
When we go and ask for help, we also need to be able to hear what is offered. Sometimes we are not very good at listening and saying, when there's a problem. So please, when you ask for help, also be ready to take or at least consider the help that is offered. And if we are in a position to help, but we are not the best person to help, please, you're playing around with someone's life, please go ahead and refer that person to someone who's better equipped, better trained, more competent to deal with the situation.
So what final message would you like to give our viewers on like mental health or suicide? If there is any message you want to give them.
Yeah, I think the message needs to be very clear that there is no health without mental health, and mental health is everyone's business. It needs to be a coordinated approach. I would strongly urge the government of the day and the different ministries and people working in this area that we need to talk more about mental health, see what services are available, where we are lacking, and let's help each other out. It's great that we celebrate it in Fiji. Let's make every day a mental health day.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, for me, I believe that there are people out there who are watching and they are suffering through depression, and please talk to someone. There's always help available. I believe there's the Lifeline, and there are other professional services out there, and there's always hope. No matter how dark the tunnel may be, the light will only get brighter if you walk towards it.
Thank you very much for coming on this evening. And there you have it. There is always hope. That was For the Record this evening. We hope you enjoyed the show and will join us again next Sunday. From the team and I, good night.